So welcome to Mindful Communication. And this is a topic that I feel very passionate about because it's much easier to be mindful when we're not in interaction. And there's something that happens when we enter in interaction with another that is slightly dysregulating to us. And what I mean by dysregulating is that the nervous system is required to take in more information than if we were not with somebody else. And in particular, when we're talking about conversation, there is a lot of information that the nervous system is absorbing. And usually conversations happen very quickly. Somebody speaks, we're tracking what they're saying, and at the same time, we're formulating our response. So that multitasking alone takes us away from being able to be as present as we could had we been alone. We're also not just listening to content, we're paying attention to nonverbal cues. We're noticing tone, we're noticing facial expressions. We're even trying to attune to what's underneath all of that, which is motivation. Have you ever had the experience where you're listening to someone say something to you, but it's not congruent with the energy that they're emoting, like you're picking something else up? So there's a lot that's going on underneath the surface. And one of the reasons why we want to be as present as possible in conversation is so that we have the availability of awareness to be able to take in all of that information and to be able to have intentionality around how we respond. And if you think about most of our conversations, are we even aware of what our intentions for speaking is? Are you aware of what you want to get out of the conversation? Are you aware of how what you're saying has an impact on the other? And are you able to track that impact as you're in conversation? Are you able to track their impact on you before you respond? So it's a pretty complex, dynamic scenario that we walk into when we are going into conversations. And I think that before even going into conversation, the most important factor that we are going to have a connecting conversation that's going to lead to understanding is, what is the intentionality? Why are we speaking? Why are we engaging with the other? So I want to take a moment, and maybe we can do this in breakout rooms, for you to reflect a little bit about what is it that you're wanting when you go into a conversation? What are the needs of yours that are being met by having conversations? And to make this a little bit easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat a list of human needs that we all share. And if you'd like, you can refer to this list when you're in the chat and reflect together on what are the needs. And maybe what we can do is, let me put this in the chat right now. And before we go there, go ahead and open the needs list. I'll share my screen so that you can see it as well. And just take a look at what these needs are. And you can write this down on a piece of paper, or if you want, you can start writing it in the chat. What are some needs that you want to have met when you go into a conversation? And of course, this is very context dependent. If the conversation is a work conversation, my needs are going to be different than if it's a conversation that I'm having with my friend, which is going to be different than the conversation I'm going to be having with my child. It's important to understand what are the needs that we're trying to meet in conversation, because these are the needs are what's going to shape the direction of the conversation. This is what's driving conversation. So now that you've had a moment to look over these, let me put you in breakout rooms and we'll just go for 2 minutes each. So it will be a total of 4 minutes where you can share out what are some needs of yours that are important that you get met through conversation. I realize that probably was not enough time for you to conclude all of your needs, but I would love to either hear from you or see it in the chat. What were your top 3 needs that you're looking to get met when you are in conversation? Yeah, the need for equity, the need for reciprocity, mutuality. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm seeing connection, acceptance, closeness. I'm going to throw in there permissiveness, where I can show up however I am without having to withhold and to be allowed to self-express. Great. Yeah, I'm seeing partnership, communication. I would also throw in there shared reality. Are we even talking about the same thing? And one thing I'm surprised to not see there is mattering. To see and be seen, yes. But really, I think at the core of it is mattering. That if we feel like we don't matter, it's really hard to stay engaged in the conversation. It's really hard to have buy-in. And actually, a lot of times where communication goes sideways is when that need for either party is not being met. So I wanted to lay out the needs because this is the foundation for how conversations are going to go. If the conversation is not meeting our fundamental needs for mattering, for connection, for understanding, for being allowed to self-express, knowing that we're going to be heard, the conversation is not going to go well. It's not going to be connecting. What is your conversation style like? What are you, how are you coming into conversation and what are you expecting from others? So I'll give an example. My style is that oftentimes I'll come into conversation and I'm more of a listener type. So I'll listen to be able to collect information. Takes a while for me to digest. I really want the other person to have space to be seen and heard. And I really want to establish connection by allowing them to express freely without me interrupting them. The flip side of that is oftentimes there is self-sacrifice where I end up in a situation where I listen more than I am listened to. And that doesn't meet my need for mattering or mutuality. And so I find that my tendency is this in communication. What is your tendency in communication? So again, give you a moment to reflect. I'm going to put you back into breakout rooms so that you can kind of share with somebody else. A big part of the learning is being witnessed by the other and having the opportunity to hear the differences, remind us of, oh, I didn't think about that. I do that too. So we'll take another 2 minutes each. Just take a moment right now to reflect about what your communication style is as I set up the breakout room. What's your tendency when you go into conversation? Do you feel more comfortable speaking or listening? Is there equity? What do you find ends up triggering you in conversation? What did you discover is your communication style? Was there anything surprising that you hadn't thought about before? Yeah, that's a great observation. Really beautiful that you want to meet the other person where they're at. Right. And you want to join them in their reality by showing that you also have shared reality. And really, really neat that you were able to also notice the cost of that, which is it's hard to be listening to someone fully when I'm formulating my own response. It's hard to let them know that they matter and they're being seen and heard when I'm also engaged in my own story. And so how do we find the balance between those two? That's a great starting place. Yeah. And it's a starting place because it allows us to see what's our habitual pattern and to question, is it effective? Great. Thanks for that share. It's pretty vulnerable when we start doing this work because we start noticing some of our tendencies and And sometimes we're not necessarily 100% confident that those tendencies are skillful if what we're trying to do is to cultivate connection and understanding between two people. That maybe there is a difference in how much of the center of gravity is on me versus the other person. And that might influence their sense of mattering if I'm prioritizing my sense of mattering, or my sense of I need to be seen, I need to be heard. But can we do that in a way that doesn't come at the cost of the other being seen and heard and knowing that they matter? So equity is a really important piece. But it also is really beautiful because it points to a fundamental need that's there, which is that of fun. And not only that, there's something about being the storyteller. And if you're really engaging, is I want attention. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all want attention. I want attention. And again, no problem with that as long as it's not harming the other, as long as it's not coming at the cost of the other. So this is the tricky bit about mindful communication, is we're really tracking what's going on for us, meaning what's our motivation that's driving our actions. And we're also tracking what's the impact on the other. Great. Any other comments? So I love that you brought the need for safety in conversation, because that's foundational, right? That's what allows us to feel comfortable in self-expressing. That also is what allows us to feel comfortable in setting boundaries when we're going beyond threshold and the person is unaware of their impact on us. We feel confident enough in being able to give them feedback about, hey, you know, I've been listening for a while. I'm having a hard time tracking what you're saying. I'm wondering if I can say something back. Being able to help the other person navigate conversation is also our responsibility, because oftentimes we'll be in a conversation and something will happen and we'll get mad at the other person. Like, they don't listen to me. They just talk all the time. Well, I'm aware of that, but I haven't said anything. And the other person's not aware because they're totally sucked into the story and being the storyteller, and in their excitement have lost presence. But if I have presence, it's my responsibility to let the other person know what that impact is on me. And to do so before I get so over threshold that I'm resentful. This is tricky. This is really tricky. In particular, if we have wounding around interrupting. My upbringing is if I interrupted, I got punished. So guess what? I'm always the listener. And then I get blamed and faulted because I didn't speak up. So you see the situation or the dilemma that we find ourselves in. There's a lot in conversation. It's not just about chit-chatting. We bring our core wounds to the table when we're in conversation. All of that comes up. Going back to why it's so important to have presence in communication. We're tracking ourselves, we're tracking the other, we're tracking the interaction. We're tracking what's being said, we're tracking what the emotions are that are driving that, we're tracking what are the fundamental needs that's driving all of that. That's a lot. And at the same time, we're trying to figure out whose turn is it to speak. Have I gone too long? There's the logistical aspect. So what's the solution to all of this? Because it sounds kind of overwhelming, the amount of information we're receiving. Well, the solution is to slow it down. If you slow it down, it's easier to be present. So what's it like to have a slower conversation? So let's practice that, because that is something we are not used to. We get excited and we pick up. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about what might be a core wounding that you have around conversations. And you don't have to go into too much detail if it feels vulnerable. But when you were growing up, I'm sure you were taught your conversation style. So maybe it's my core wounding is people don't normally pay attention to me. That's why I don't stop talking, because I want attention. Or I was shamed and made fun of a lot when I spoke. So now I feel uncomfortable speaking. My core wounding is I generally feel unsafe around new people. So I'd rather let them speak so I can get a sense of who they are before I even expose myself. Right? So you can reflect over this. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to share that with your partner. I'll give you 3 minutes for this each. And I'd like you to do it slowly. You're going to start getting into it and you're going to speed up, and partner, your job, you just kind of with the hand, slow down. Slow down. So the person that's listening, what you're doing is you're practicing giving feedback in a place that's safe in the setting. And you don't have to interrupt, just with your hand, just slow down. And the other person that's speaking, see if you can not take that personally and slow it down a little bit, because the reason why we're slowing down is so that they can understand you better. Okay. So we'll go for 3 minutes each, and then we'll switch, and then we'll come back to debrief together as a group. So you all had a chance to at least speak, and I'm just really curious, what was it like to have to slow down? This is important to notice, even this step, because somebody one day will ask you to slow down. And what do? We take it personally. That we did something wrong. And in fact, what does slowing down mean? It means I can take in what you're saying better. I can understand you better. So I want to present this perspective as well, so that you feel comfortable asking others to slow down. And you can preface it by sharing what your intention is. I'm wondering if you're willing to slow down. I really want to catch the details and the essence of what you're saying, and the speed in which it's being offered. I'm unable to keep up with what you're saying. Flip this. Speaker, what do you think is the advantage of slowing down? Even if you didn't experience it, what do you think is your advantage if you were to slow down? Part of slowing down is that we can be intentional. A lot of what we say is unnecessary. Have you noticed? Most of what we say is unnecessary. It's noise pollution. It dysregulates the other person, meaning it's added stuff that is thrown at their nervous system. And they're just receiving, because we have this belief, the social belief, that when we're spoken to, we're supposed to listen. And if we don't listen, we're being disrespectful. But there was never consent to hear in the first place. Nobody asked me before they barged into my room and started speaking with me if I actually wanted to listen to what they said. And if I don't want to listen, all of a sudden, I'm punished for it. Yet, don't I have the right to choose where my attention goes? So, coming back to your comment about respect, is when we're slowing down, we are respecting the other person's capacity to receive information in a way that is digestible. But the other aspect that we need to consider is, was there consent in the first place, if we're thinking about respect? When I slow down, there's intentionality around what I'm going to say. I also can think before speaking, not speak and then realize what I said. This is an incredible power, to have intention around what you're saying. We can make sure that how we're saying is in alignment with our values. We're not reactively speaking. It gives us agency. And so what would be great is if you go and practice for today or tomorrow when you're going to be in conversation, because you will, just practice slowing down and see how the other takes in what's being said. Because slowing down lets me track my impact. If I'm going too fast, I'm excited, I'm not present. If I slow down as I'm speaking, I can look at their faces and I can notice what is the impact of my words, and I can change directions if it's not going in the direction that I want. Whereas if I'm going too fast, not only am I unaware, but I have less opportunities to have control about where the conversation is going. So practice slowing down. And when someone comes into contact with you, if you're feeling like it's too much, practice asking them to slow down and let them know what the motivation is. Because otherwise they're going to feel like you're trying to control them, and nobody wants that. You're going to tell them how to speak. Nobody wants that. So link that to the motivation that you're wanting connecting, you're wanting understanding.